Okay, so I'm gonna do another one on energy and religion. And so like there's usually like some theory people develop around original sin. Now sometimes this goes a little further than being Christian because it's like they can do this to anyone that they do it to. Basically they make them feel like crap for wanting to procreate, and then they do something else. I was a little different person that like, when I miscarried the first one, I felt so numb. But there's three types of people right now, and it seems to be introvert, extrovert, and then advert. So you have ads off of this, and then there's like I've been watching a little bit of the Stewie show in a warehouse on like AIDS and stuff like that, and just being released, and then ads and stuff like that. So everything gets an ad. So instead of you actually being an extrovert, it's really more of an ad. It's like a two-dimensional show. Um, or an extrovert, really, really actually truly being one, or truly being an introvert. It's more like an ad. So, like that whole image, that mirror is a little off. So, we have the way I would go about getting through it, because really you're gonna have like homelessness shoot up like in a decade, and the prices go up on things because there's a little thing, something happening where it's pushing it out to the quality of one, but they're being mean. It's kind of weird. So then you'll have like, watching Reagan's old stuff, honest to God, hands down, that's like the light going faster backwards and weird. Um, like when he says tear down the wall or something like that, and then like goes to the UN, he goes, sometimes I think for all of us to get together, we'd all need an alien invasion. And like the idea, like with um, necromancy, because apparently they threw they made movies like with the highest position for democracy, because they don't tell the rest of the world when they open up democracy that really the highest position is a lawyer, and a lawyer is not really like the president or anything, but they're really like a high position, and not to see evil technically in people. Like they're not, they can, but like if they do, it becomes more like a badgering thing that doesn't actually defend anybody. Then they had set up what they called mental health courts because um, basically the position of democracy started going down. Then they went to the UN and offered it to the rest of the world, and everybody just started flying bombs. Well, the proper court system is apart from family and everybody. They're not taught to see evil in you, but to have your defense. And so, like, the sad thing, there was just this little sad thing, like in the Matt Damon movie about it, where something was actually taught to see evil. And I won't get into that one too fast. But so, anyways, Amitai is, and I'm going to put it right here, Amitai, right there. And then you have like, I can't even remember the last lettering, but it's like a 7, an X, and then you have Jonas. Jonas is the son, which means, and his dad's name was True, right? So like to go through all this stuff, you'd have to like go through like really like a Jonas situation, because properly, because you can't like attack, like how do you say, people of understanding, then give it away in the mental health court to people of no understanding, and then have what they call like a situation where I said about the introvert, extrovert, and pretty much just advert, and nobody's really buying. That real zombie shell comes out of them that no one's really buying. They're not purchasing anymore. there's no capital being made, and there's nothing, and good inventions get shot down. Excuse me. Then it gets pushed out to like the gas theory. But I have a theory about that. I have a theory about possibly that whole time period, that possibly like there was somebody who could abused maybe a female back then, and it caused a run situation, and probably didn't meet Hitler or anything like that, but the whole idea about doing these weird things about transgenderism and Methuselah, which some boyfriend might walk up to you and be like, think they're older than you're like, whatever, older than Noah, and then they cause like the flood because of fear. But they're getting shelled, they feel shelled inwardly that way too. So it'd be like as if I said only flying saucers in the United States and build a big green tent, like let's say if it was like Mexico or like China, over like them. Just put a freaking big green tent over them. And you understand what I'm saying. Like it's all really without home. That's why I said like I think that religious schools, not some of them in the later years, some of them were like really like that whole Boston type of really tiny thing where they are already getting prison like or whatever, but have like the nicest bathrooms. So those people that like to do the shit monster, that's in there. So then anyways, so if you use a mirror on the 7, it's backwards. And I talked about it in the other video about 7, what the meaning of like, well, I didn't really go into the meaning of 7, but it's in like book 5 of it, and there's a movie out there. It's like following little Brad Pitt for the BP oil disaster type thing, but like, you know, type stuff like that. So there's this other thing. It's called, I couldn't figure it out, but a friend of mine named Jesse came over and Googled it, and I forgot what he called it, but it's ETA, also pronounced something, in some 7th star constellation. Well, there is this group, I guess, I don't know, like in lower France and Spain, and like they're known like Basques or something like that. But there was a language that they spoke, and there was a word that was kind of scary. And if you know anything about the middle 8, because like when you file bankruptcy, that's what's going to happen. You can't purchase a car for like 3 years. Plus they're like Tesla cars because they're really hurting. Sometimes they're hurting good wealthy people. And that's bad. So you can't do that. And the other thing is you can't do what they call like I don't know, the people that don't have any knowledge of it are just they have way more, you know, because it's like the fear of not being cared for. And if you really go through Psalm 51 and find like where people kind of messed up with the idea of original sin, and that's all forgivable because they're probably like, you know, whatever, trying to study something. But if they push it into the philosophy, or somebody takes it and sells it into the philosophy, it becomes an original sin that gets like sold. Somehow people have to be able to identify this. Like we need to wake up and identify things like that, because that's turns into stalking. It might be, you know, a different type of stalking for someone, but later in the future there would be like a group stalking. Or when they use too many Michaels, there's a gang in it. I know there is. That's 100% always been the case. When that's like they use the Archangel Michael a lot, and then they flip it to that. So you have to find it in there. We need to be able to see that. But there's like this word, and for ETA, and those are the Bosques, it said something like that, and it's Iranetatarrak, so Iranetatarrak, but the middle part is exactly ETA, and that's estimated time of arrival. So like, for example, people going to visit somebody with the phone systems at the same time, they're doing ball worship, but they don't know it because the phone tech system is actually doing it. They have this thing set up with like food. So for example, like all of a sudden out of nowhere, the guys who weren't having children had children, for example, and then the other ones went down, and then they push the ball over and they just play 7, bankruptcy. They call it under 7 that they're bankrupt. And even though their companies are not being called out for what made it bankrupt or helped, because some of them are good companies and they just need help or things like that. And then it jumps over to 8, and then this is like wrong, it's called middle 8. They play middle 8. So and then they file for, I think, chapter 13, which would be like a grace thing. And I think maybe the Pope picked up on it because you got 2, and they put up specifically worded John Paul II, and I always like found that weird. And then Francis was like, is it better to love or to be loved? I was like, because that is the question. It's called intangible relationships. I forgive all the ones that I've had, but that's what happens.